to A Well-Designed Business. My name is LuAnn, and I'm so glad you found this podcast. Together with my husband Vince and our partner Bill, we have grown our company Window Works from the ground up. So I know and I understand the challenges you face in running your interior design business. I also know that your talent alone isn't enough to ensure your success. So on this podcast, we talk about strategies and practical steps to help you grow your business. But make no mistake about it, we have our share of fun here too, mixed in with those aha moments that I love so much. This isn't fluff. Nobody has time for that. Whether you are a new interior designer or a seasoned designer, I am here to help you create and to manage the kind of interior design firm that you dream of. It's straight talk and it's action. Are you ready? Let's get started. Hi, welcome to A Well-Designed Business. Big treat on the show today, and we have my friend Jenny Slingerland of Black Ink Interiors to thank for it. Jenny works with Brad Leavitt, the president and founder of AFT Construction in their home state of Arizona. And Jenny called me and said, Lou, you have to connect with Brad. He's an amazing builder. He also has his own podcast called AFT Construction, and you two just have to know each other. And I have to say, from there, Brad and I did connect. He invited me on his show. And, you know when you hit it off with somebody, you just hit it off with them? Well, that was how it was for Brad, and I could easily see why Jenny loves him so much. Now, before I tell you more about Brad and AFT Construction, let me tell you about Monogram Appliances, one of our newest sponsors. Monogram Appliances wants to partner with you and support you on your next build project. When your client wants the finest in luxury appliances for their kitchen, Monogram is the place to look. Luxury, high-tech, unmatched customer experience. Go to monogram.com/LuAnn and set up your design trade account today. That's monogram.com/LuAnn. Okay, now, AFT Construction is an award-winning construction firm and has been nationally published in magazines such as Fine Home Building, Luxe Interiors and Design, and Professional Builder. Brad Leavitt is an energetic public speaker and ambassador for many national brands, including Kohler, Pella, Cambria, Elkay, Sub-Zero Wolf, and Post-it Notes. Brad completed a Bachelor of Science in Construction Management from BYU in 2005 and has worked on notable projects around Phoenix, including the Omni Montelucia in Paradise Valley. His podcast, the AFT Construction Podcast, is focused on bringing value to its listeners no matter their industry. The topics range from marketing, social media, entrepreneurship, organization, building science, and construction. I can tell you that tons of interior designers are already listening to Brad's podcast, and I encourage you to do the same thing, okay? When you listen, you will understand how AFT has come to be known in the industry for creating strong client relationships, which are based on integrity, reliability, and quality. All right. Brad lives with his wife, Ashley, and they have 6 kids, 5 girls and a boy. He's active in all of their lives, also serves in the local community, and Brad himself loves sports. Okay. So I want to encourage you, as I said, to listen to his podcast, but understand that today, Brad is going to explain from the builder side all the reasons why he knows that his projects are more beautiful, more efficient, and more profitable when an interior designer is partnering with him on the project. See, this is what was very exciting to me when I learned and spoke to Brad. So I'm excited to introduce Brad Leavitt to you today. Hi, Brad. Thanks so much for joining me on A Well-Designed Business today.
Thanks for having me, LuAnn.
I was like, whoa, this is like, it's so funny, Brad. I have my friend Jamie Lieberman, who is the owner of #Legal, and she's a lawyer, and she's actually going to have a chapter in my upcoming book. But I always say about Jamie, she's the least lawyerly lawyer that I know. And when I spoke with you, I was like, he is like the least buildery guy I know. Like, you actually talk in real life language, like you're a human being. There's no like, yeah, well, I don't know what you mean. Like, I just don't know how to describe it to you. So, but we just hit it off. And I've worked with my share of builders over the years through Window Works. And you have such a great outlook and opinion on not only the design build process from your standpoint in your company, because I've been listening to your podcast and I can hear how well run your company is, but also you embrace and love the interior designer, which makes me love you even more.
Yeah, it's a must. You have to, right?
Right. So you really do have and maybe I'm not being fair. I probably know a dozen builders, right? So maybe I shouldn't judge every builder in America by the 12 that I know, right? But I do think it is rare. I have found it to be rare to have and to know a builder that has this full 360 view and is committed to the full 60 view. You said when I was on your show that your company will not build a home for a client that does not have an interior designer on the project.
Absolutely. And it's funny you say that, LuAnn. And before we get into that, when I had you on my podcast, it was amazing, the response, because you gave so much value as far as systems and auditing and doing the word I love, autopsy, right?
Yeah.
And even as good as we think we are at times, I'm like, wow, there's some pointers, and we immediately started making changes internally. So thank you for that, because the feedback was amazing. But I'll say to your point, yes, this is so important. It's over the years, I don't know what it is in the construction industry and the mentality, but I have been around other companies before I started mine, and you'd see maybe the disregard for the architect or the disregard for the interior designer, and not really understanding the amount of time and effort and knowledge and expertise and training that they offer, and even more so, just the benefit that they bring to us as the builder. And so it was really easy for me as I started to work with these very talented designers. Fortunately, my background, I was able to work on these amazing commercial and residential projects all throughout Scottsdale and Phoenix. And I met some of these talented firms and ladies and individuals that just made my life so much easier. And so one of the goals when I started AFT, our company, 7 years ago, was to create a mandatory requirement for our clients that if they call me and say, hey, Brad, we want you to build our house. We know your reputation. We know your skill set and your quality and all those things that go into it. But we want to do our own design. We kind of know what we like. And, we feel that we can do that portion ourselves. And my immediate response is, well, then I'm not your builder, right? You're calling the wrong person. We need to have a designer. And it was funny because about a year ago, there was a client that I had the same conversation, and I told him that, and he kind of stepped back and he's like, why would I need a designer? And I said, well, let's talk about that. Here's about 20 things that you're not taking into consideration that you need to. And he did hire an interior designer, and it really changed the success of that project.
So what I love is, you see, as designers listening, I hope each one of you who have had a hard time literally with that moment that Brad just described, because you've all had it in your business where something should be done a certain way, and then all of a sudden you have the client that seems like a great client that you really don't want to say no to, and you're afraid if you say no, you have to say no to all their country club friends, and you're going to lose all the referrals. But that you should say no. And it's proven over and over again with successful business owners that when the no is based on something so concrete and so tangible that the outcome is better if the no is there, that it makes your business better. So I'm sure it wasn't easy to have this mandatory requirement that everybody has a designer. Like, you came out of the gate with this, Brad? Is that the case? Or did you, after a year or two of having AFT Construction, come around to it?
That's a great question. So it's funny because I always knew, the success of our projects are dictated by the talent and sophistication and understanding of our designers. They really are. And what's funny is sometimes you learn by default. Mm-hmm. I did the same thing where at the very beginning, as we're starting to build a name, I would want the project and the customer would say, well, we don't really need a designer. Okay, well, we want the job. Let's push through this. And in every single instance, it always had issues and problems and breakdowns at some point in the project. And so it became apparent that we need to just make this is our SOP. This is our standard. If you hire us, we are hiring a designer. And even though the client may say, well, there's costs involved, well, now having a better understanding of the process and the value the designers bring, it's really easy to help them understand that investment of a designer will end up saving money to them in the long run, because now you're going to have information decided up front, which means better pricing, more accurate pricing, right? No scope gaps. It's going to allow us to build quicker. Well, whether you're paying cash or you have a construction loan, there's carrying costs. There's things that go into a duration of a project. So my fee, if a client says, hey, Brad, I want to hire you, but not a designer. Okay, well, then my fee is going to go up $75,000, right? Because I know the amount of time it's going to cost me. So this is what, in some cases, we have to educate the client so that they understand the value bringing the designer on from the very beginning.
So you can relate to those beginning years when you are knowing the right way to do it, but wanting to build the business and wanting to get the particular client and saying, okay. But then it comes, just like, I have that saying that I have on my website, some famous German guy said it, is like an expert is someone who has made every mistake in their field, right? Like, you
right.
Get to that, right? So the thing is, what you're saying is you can recall and you can remember, like many of us do. We learn it by the hard lesson. We learn it by saying, yeah, I really want it, so I'll let go. What I know is the better process. But eventually there's enough times where you're just saying to yourself, okay, that is the 15th time that it's been confirmed for me that without a designer, everything is harder. And so when you just said at the end there, so you don't want a designer, my fee is going to go up 75. Was that the middle ground, or do you actually will you still sometimes do that? Okay, absolutely, but it's another $75K, or was that like step one was saying, okay, when I wanted to say no. Step two was, okay, I want to say no, but I'll add money. And step three is now it's 7 years in. It doesn't happen with AFT Construction unless you have a designer.
Phenomenal question. Way to bring that around. So yes, what in the beginning, so when I say that now, it's almost jokingly, because really it comes down to one or two things. Either you hire us with the designer or you don't. I mean, my fee is my fee. And so we've had to learn that lesson. And every project that we have in the last 18 months and moving forward has a designer, and we will not deviate. It is just, the camaraderie, the synergy. And I think as we talk about a higher level with this, a lot of times, people will reach out and say, Brad, what's the process? I want to build a home. Where do I start? And I get a lot of these phone calls, these job inquiries from social media and just other relationships and friends of clients and whatnot. And the one thing that I think most consumers don't understand is there's this mentality that I need to design my home with my architect. And then after the home's designed, from an architectural standpoint, let's find an interior designer and let's start picking finishes. And let's then send this out to 3 general contractors, get 3 bids, and here's our price. Right. And it really is defeating in so many ways, because there's so much lost time. There's so much coordination that could be done. And even more than that, what happens is this cat and mouse game, and you don't know if the GC is going to undermine you and maybe substitute things or value engineer, VE the project. Whereas the projects that are most successful is when a client says, okay, I'm going to hire Brad and AFT. I'm going to hire this architect and this designer. Here's my budget. I'd really like to spend $1 million on this house. Great. Now as a team, us 3 know the budget. It's not this cat and mouse game. And from design, we can start working on layout and elevations and design and make sure that everything's going to flow and work and communicate with each other. And then at the end of the day, be appealing, right? Which is what we want. And we hit that budget.
I can see the difference there. It's so, what, especially from the standpoint of honoring budget and meeting the client expectations as far as the aesthetic, right?
Exactly. That's precisely it. Because what happens is, let's say the customer has $1 million budget. Well, the builder should be savvy enough and the team that they could break that down and say, okay, well, if we have $1 million budget and the house is 5,000 square feet, I can easily, based on the style of the home and our database and work history, I have a good range of what the concrete will be and the exterior finishes and the framing and the insulation and so forth. And then that allows me now to get a budget for cabinetry and countertops. So then as we're designing and the homeowner wants to do whatever it may be, maybe they want to add, a lot of built-ins throughout the house. It's really easy to say, hey, we have, 100,000 base for cabinetry. This will cover these areas based on a rough linear footage and selections. But the minute you start adding this, this is going to add 20, 30% to the cabinet line. So what ends up happening, it makes it really easy for the consumer to now, there's this check and balance from the team that as they're making selections, they may say, you know what, I don't really need these built-ins, but I do want to add this big multi-slider and I want to automate it. Okay, well, that automation is going to be an extra $6,000. No problem. I know that'll increase my budget. So really it creates a basis there that helps us all work. And where it really helps the designer too is I think one of the most frustrating things, at least I don't design, but what's relayed to me is where an interior designer will come design the home. And let's say the homeowner wants brass. They love gold. They love brass. Well, they do this design and the customer comes back and says, you know what, I want to do black fixtures. Well, if you're going to go to a matte black, that's totally changing the style and it changes everything. Or it may happen where they've designed this amazing home, it comes in over budget, and the client wants them to redesign it. Well, now the designer shouldn't be forced to redo all this work, right? If we're working hand in hand and I'm meeting with my designer saying, hey, this flooring's great, but it's going to be $45 a square foot in the laundry. We've only planned on $30 a square foot. We can go to the client and say, hey, we can find something in that $30 range, or it's going to be a little bit more. It's the laundry room, not a huge area, but at least they have some budgets of overages, So it's this running number, which really helps the client understand from their side what they want and what they don't.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's awesome. So one of the things is you don't have your own in-house designers where you say, hey, I'm AFT Construction and the designer is part of it, my team. You might do a project with like Jenny at Black Ink Interiors, and you might do a different project with Brittany Simon or with Lexi Westergaard. These are all luxury designers out in Arizona. Is that so? You are a fluid member of multiple designers and architects. These are your community of people. And if a client needs a recommendation, you might select one of your colleagues, or your colleague, Jenny might come to you and say, I've got the client, Brad. Now let's get you in as the architect and somebody else as the builder and somebody else as the architect.
100%. That is so accurate. So I do not have any in-house design or architecture, and that's by intent. And the reason I do that is because over the years of AFT, I think we've worked with 17 interior design firms. I've done projects with Lexi and Jenny. I know Brittany, and other designers here in town. And there's a few reasons. One of the disadvantages of doing an in-house design is we kind of get locked into a certain style, more or less. Whereas my firm, we're really interested in doing, a modern farmhouse, and then a super ultra contemporary, and then maybe a Tuscan home or Mediterranean. And so these different styles, it just changes the drive of my team. And the only way to correctly do that is align ourselves with all these different designers of many talents. And we just love the camaraderie and the relationship and, the synergy that's created. Plus, at the end of the day, it enhances our portfolio. So the way that typically works, when a client comes to me and says, hey, Brad, we want to hire you. They know my philosophy and ethos. Okay, well, we need a designer. I ask them some questions. Well, what is the value of the home? What's the style? And right away, I have an idea based on their budget, based on their taste. I know of the 15 to 20 designers that I network with and have relationships with. Okay, it's probably going to be one of these 2 or 3 that I really trust. And then I'll let them meet with the designer, interview them, because a big part of it's fit, as we all know. It should be an interview for me to the client as well as them to me, because we need to make sure we're essentially married for 2 years. So let's make sure this is going to be a good fit. So we set them up, let them make that. And then I let them contract direct. I don't try to run it through me. I don't try to mark it up. I just say, hey, you go direct with the client, and then we'll facilitate the relationship and the coordination and the team, and then let them just pick who they feel most comfortable with.
I love it. And I know what you mean. At Window Works, we work with probably 25 or 30 different interior designers in the New York, New Jersey metro area here. And it's the same thing. If I walk into a project and a prospective consumer is trying to figure out window treatments, particularly if it's for a whole house at one time or major areas, and the whole space is in flux. Oh, I want to do the window treatments for my kitchen. Okay, are you changing anything? Oh, yeah, I'm gutting it. Oh, okay, sweetie. Then why don't we just pick the window treatments first? Like, that's just crazy pants
right.
to me, right? You know what I mean? And so if they can't say, I'm gutting it, and here are the cabinets, here is the stone, here is the floor, here is the backsplash, then if it's just a wish in their mind and a vision in their mind that isn't realized, the first thing I'm going to say is, are you working with a designer? Because I want that designer's vision of what this, $100,000 kitchen is going to cost, so that my 2 or 3 windows fit into it, not backwards or slapped on the back of it, right? And so, to your point, I know that I go through the Rolodex in my mind of the different designers, and I always do the same thing. Pick 2 or 3. I'm like, these 2 or 3 would probably be a great fit, but see which one is the best fit for you, right?
Yeah, it's so important. And what's funny about that is that if you have you designing the windows with the designer together, it's going to fit, it's going to jive. And that's where, if they're trying to work outside of that relationship, it doesn't really work. And the most beautiful homes are when you have that team from the beginning and everyone's speaking the same language, from budget to style to design. And it's so important to get the client on board to understand the importance and value that the designer offers. Because I for any advice as a designer, I think probably one of the hardest things they deal with is educating the client the need for the client to hire them. Because most clients think, oh, I can go to this showroom and pick my faucet and this tile place and pick my flooring. But it is much more complex than that. And even if these showrooms, not to disparage them, but even though they have their own design, it kind of goes back to what you're talking about. The tile one isn't talking to, the cabinet one isn't talking to the countertop one. And so it's really hard to bring in samples and make this jive unless it's all based on one communication source.
No, it's the truth. It's like you're working in a silo, and me as a window treatment vendor, I know that feeling of, because there are clients that will just push you through it, and you're just thinking to myself, this is crazy. Like, this is great. Like, I have no idea what this kitchen is going to look like, and I just want white shades. All right then, lady, here, have your white shades. What am I going to tell you, right? But I've got one little part of the project. When you are a builder and you're going to deliver a home, what you're saying to us is that not only is the process better, but that the outcome is going to be better as well. And as talented as your team is, ultimately, it is the cohesiveness of the finished visual product that's delivered. You can build the most beautiful, sturdy, up to code, perfectly executed from a technical standpoint house. But if it looks ugly because it's not well coordinated, like, what kind of referral do you get from it? Nobody says, but it's going to stand for 50 years, right?
Exactly. And even a step further, from the designer perspective, you have to think about the end furnishings too, right? And to your point, the window drapery and the sofa and the throw pillows and the rug and all these, the runner, all these little things that go in, the lighting. These are such major components, and understanding, the value that I get from my designer is they say, hey, Brad, I know the furniture design. These are the sizes I'm purchasing. So here's the floor outlet. I need my floor outlet here. That way I can put my lamp here and hide it, And so there's so much coordination that makes my life so much easier with a true design firm, where it's not, hey, at the end of the day, I'm done with the home, and the homeowner's they didn't use a designer, so now they're trying to buy their own furniture, and it's, I don't want to say hodgepodge, but they're picking what they are, putting it in, and then they're like, hey, Brad, I need a floor outlet. Well, it's a lot more difficult had at this stage than had we have talked about this before.
Exactly. And so many mistakes are avoided with the communication between the three trades, you, the architect, the designer, and the builder from the beginning, like you just mentioned with floor outlets and stuff. So there's big mistakes that are avoided, and there's also little mistakes that are avoided too. I mean, just little things that nudge you as a homeowner. Like one of the biggest is like the window placement. Of course, that's what I gravitate to because it makes me crazy. It's like, wait, why is this window, 10 inches from the wall and 40 inches from the fireplace, but this window is 20 inches from the wall and 30 inches from the fireplace? It's like, oh, sweet Jesus, right? But then you go outside and look at the house and you're like, oh, because it lines up with the symmetry of all the windows across the whole house. But inside, the family room is, the stepchild of the house because there's nothing that's symmetrical about it, right? It's like a lot of that. Either the architect is designing from the outside and not necessarily from the inside, right? That's a real thing.
It's such good perspective because, as you mentioned, the architect's designing outside in, curb appeal in, and the designer's inside out. And so what happens is, even on small things, I mean, I look at it where, let's say it's a very traditional home with a lot of trim and stacked trim, where if the door doesn't have enough return, to the wall, and the designer has selected this stacked casing, it's not going to fit. And then you're trying to scribe it and cut it. And, one side it's 2 inches, the other side it's 6. Doesn't work, right? Same thing with windows. Maybe the way the windows are laid out, you can't get your rod, your window rod in. And so it's those little things where, designers bring so much value because they can really look at these details. They can say, okay, when I'm opening the door to the bathroom, the architect, not in all cases, but in a lot of cases, are laying out the bathroom to their understanding. But the designer's looking at it, okay, if I open my door here and it swings this way, am I looking straight at the toilet?
Right.
And, can I change this layout so I'm not looking right at that? And then let's think fast forward 8 weeks after this project's done and furnished and I want to get it photographed. Here's the visual I want. When you open the door to the bathroom, here's that photo I want because this is, magazine worthy. And so the builder and designer are more thinking of that aspect, and sometimes the architect's not. And that's why it's so important to get them all speaking at the beginning.
Right. So now some of the things that you had said to me were, we're talking about all of this aspect, the design aspect, and how the finished house ends up being a much better built house from the design aspect with the designer involved from the beginning. And the thing is, for you as a builder, that's very important. It's not just important to the homeowner. It's important to you as a builder because what happens is on the big picture level, your home, like you just described, is going to photograph better, number one. But on the little picture level, you don't have a individual client who's sitting at the country club dinner saying, oh, don't use that builder. When I open my bathroom door, I'm looking right at the toilet. And that was never your problem. That was never your fault. But the homeowner that doesn't really have a close relationship with the architect and the designer and the builder, and it's just like, okay, here's architectural plans, builder made it, they're going to lay that at you. I'm going to tell you right now. They're going to lay that at you.
It's always on the builder, right?
Exactly.
It always is. I have to cut this casing back or this, this drapery. And it's funny you say that because, I would love to steal all the credit, but I can't. But what I love is when I finish a project and my clients are like, hey, Brad, if you want to bring future clientele to take a tour, and you open that front door and there's just wow factor. You open that door and it's just wow. And why is that? Well, we had a high-end design firm that understands the impact of that entry or the way that kitchen looks and the convenience of that working triangle, how the customer is using their day-to-day life in their closet and kitchen and bathroom. And so all these elements are thought through with great intent. And so it allows us that when they're at the country club or they're with their friends, hey, you know what I love about AFT and the team I use, this architect and designers, they thought through everything, right? I have storage in my cabinetry for my knives. I have I like to sew, so I have a dedicated sewing room and there's space for it. And so there's so much value in that. At the end of the day, that's what we want. We want to build not only a sustainable, energy efficient, tight home, but also one that's going to look great and feel great, where people feel comfort. And especially, look at today with COVID, right? How more important is that today to have a sanctuary where people, as they're locked in their home, can enjoy it and it's spaced properly.
Right, exactly. So we have this number one really tangible benefit that the outcome is always better. But then from your perspective as a builder, you described to me how you also realize more profitability on your build projects because the designer is involved, right? Because the process is more efficient and streamlined. So what I would love for you to do, Brad, is designers probably innately know that, but what language, you know it intrinsically. So what language would you encourage a designer to use and for them to express to a builder who maybe hasn't had the benefit of working with a designer that's organized and has her processes down and can make his project more profitable for him?
That's a great question. So I think the sales pitch from a designer as they're working with a builder is this. So and I'll apply it to me. So our business, we're very automated. The systems and technology, we're using Builder Trend and and Bluebeam and these other softwares where I can take a design book from my designer and upload it electronically. So here's the value there. When I look at a project, and let's say most of my builds are 14 to 16 months, that's with a phenomenal designer. It's a hillside build. Well, if I didn't have a designer, this would probably take me 16 to 18 months because a lot of the decisions would be put on me. I would have to take my client to Wolf Sub-Zero, and I'd have to figure out the appliance package. And then I'd have to integrate that with my cabinet company and make sure that my outlets are in the right location because these are built-in appliances and they're specific areas, right? They have to be in by the inch, the exact location. So what happens is the designer now is bringing me a ton of value because they're saying, here, Brad, we've elevated the house. We want our floor outlet exactly here. We want it 10 feet off of the window, and then we want it 15 feet off the fireplace. Okay, that's perfect. I can take that. I can put that in the scope in my contract to my electrical sub when he's doing the underground. So now my superintendent can coordinate that before I pour the slab. No problem. Then, you're looking at appliance specs. Okay, well, the house is framed. Now I'm bringing in my cabinet company, and I already have drawings from my designer because they've already thought through where I want the trash and where I want 2 dishwashers, and everything's laid out. So now my job just became so much more efficient and less stressful because everything's there, and I can lay out my attrition. We can mark the floor with spray paint and say, here's our cabinet layout. Our refrigerator outlet for this built-in Sub-Zero now has to be at this location, and it's dialed in. And that's the value that the designers are bringing me because now it just expedites. It saves me 2 to 3 months on a build. And I don't make these numbers up. This is true database information that I've learned the hard way and seen that value. And I would say even more so, not just the financial value of time, which is going to be better for my bottom line, but my relationship with the customer. If I have a designer that wasn't on the project, or I have a designer that maybe isn't up to speed and they're just handing me Pinterest pictures that don't really relate to the home I'm building, right? They say, how do I want this fireplace detail? Well, here's a Pinterest image. Well, that picture doesn't really match our field conditions. So how do you want this return? How do you want this detail? If we had that information, the client likes me at the end of the day because I'm not calling them, and their time's valuable. So they're not wasting time at a ton of these meetings and going to resource at all these different stores and me calling them saying, hey, how high do you want this light, this hanging chandelier off of the table? Well, I don't know. What should I do? Whereas a designer will say, hey, Brad, I want this 50 inches off finished floor. Perfect, And so that's the value that they're not only saving me time and money, but they're saving my relationship with the customer, which in 5 years we hope to do their second home or their friend's home or their country club member's home.
Mm-hmm. So I love that point right there, that not only is it legitimately going to save 2 to 3 months or more in the actual time it takes to build the home, but what's funny is we understand that you having to stop and start, you having to walk them through the appliance selection, and then you having to then figure out where the appliances are going to go, and then you having to then let your electrician know. All of that without the designer is conversation after conversation after conversation. With the designer, he or she is out at the appliance store. He or she is creating the plan. You're doing something else on your job. You're laying foundation or picking up lumber, and then you get the notification of what it is. And so I love that we can understand very clearly how that not only saves you time, but I love your little caveat there that it makes your relationship better with your client, with your homeowner, because to your point, you're not like, oh, you didn't tell me where the refrigerator's going. Well, how do I know where the refrigerator's going? Go call the appliance guy, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's so awesome. And is there a percentage? I know every builder, every market, everything is different, but if I'm a designer pitching a builder, is it significant enough for me, Brad, to say, in my experience, you will save 2 to 3 months of construction time with me on your project? Or should I have a percentage where I say, in my experience, you'll maximize your profit by X percent by having me on the project? Is one better than the other, or the first is completely impactful enough to a builder?
Now, if you put that in the context of where I am, so let's just think if you were to save 1 month on a 10-month build, right? That's 10%. So if you look at this, I think 5 to 8% is an easy number. Well, most contractors are operating at small margins, as we know. So if you can tell them, hey, I can save you, if you're billing, let's just say $100,000 in supervision, and I'm saving you $8,000, that's real money that the builder can save. And they're not far off. I can easily say on my projects that I do that we're saving over 10% in overhead because of the arm of our designer. Because as you mentioned, our designers are project coordinators, right? There's a lot of value they bring, but one of the biggest things is they're sourcing all the product and material and putting this together in a book and giving it to me saying, hey, Brad, you have your architectural plans. Here's my design book. And on the estimating side alone, how much time it saves me, because now I'm only sending out one book. I'm sending out the plans and the design book to my tile guys, to my framers, and everyone has all the information and all the ceiling details, whether we're doing coffered ceilings or faux beams. And so it really makes it easy for us to manage the construction, the costing, and then the build. And it's funny, as I speak to builders around the country, a lot of them just have never thought about this. They've never thought about that second arm of their company that they could be using. And it's funny because as I talk to them, they're like, I get it. I see the value. There's some designers in my town I need to talk to right now. And it's just so valuable to have that, and plus when we take this a step further, when you're looking at marketing, well, as you and I know, some of these national publications won't even consider you unless you have a designer, builder, and architect on the job. If I do a job and it's me and the architect, no designer, they won't even consider me to be published.
Right. See, and that is a very powerful thing to add. So when we think about a designer pitching a builder to start a relationship and maybe to just take that first step and let's do a project together, you stand firm, Mr. Builder Man, and tell your client you won't do it without a designer, right? Is that the designer can say that I am going to shorten the build time of this house, and that is going to translate in a percentage saved. And I really can understand that. If I'm expecting that I'm going to make $100K, then if I can make another even $8,000 or $16,000 if it's too much, like that's the gravy money. Like I was going to do this project for the $100K, right? So now that gravy money is the seed money for marketing. It's the seed money for another employee. It's whatever it is, right? So I'm saying to them that you're going to save time and money. I'm saying to them that you're going to have a smoother relationship with your consumer. And I'm also saying to them, hey, did you want to get into some regional or even national magazines? Because we don't think about that part. As designers, we think, oh, it's so hard to get into publications. Oh, my goodness, what am I going to do? But when I think about somebody like your firm, Brad, I know that you are doing high-end luxury homes. But I mean, honestly, I can hear it now. It's no matter how beautiful the final home you delivered, if it doesn't have the interior furnishings in it, I don't think I've ever seen a home, no matter how beautiful, in Architectural Digest without furniture in it.
They won't.
Right?
They will not publish it. No.
That's it.
And it's funny. Yeah. And as you were sharing that, it triggered my mind in a couple other things because one, we're saving money to the bottom line just in time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And these are real things. If I don't have to spend an hour at the design showroom with my client because my designer is, well, that's real time savings that I could be focused on another part of my business. And even more so, now let's get into finishes. Well, a great designer doesn't have to flood my email box with 1,000 emails a day on, hey, make sure that the bathroom tile is at this height and we have this decorative shower niche here. All of that's done on the drawing. So when I get in the field, my team, and we have our tile guys mud setting the shower and getting ready to do that, we can put up a picture of the design book and tape it to the wall that clearly shows here's the height of the tile, here's the layout. I want it running horizontal, or running bond or whatever it may be. And there's no question. So here's two things. One, I don't have to make 20 calls to my designer. They don't have to call me because it's there, it's concrete. And then it saves me money because I'm not going to make a mistake. I'm not going to install the tile shower wrong for the designer and client to come back later and say, hey, you installed this wrong. And I have to rip it out and do it again, which costs me money to my bottom line. So that's where just that cohesiveness of the communication and information, again, I can schedule my people well in advance. I know all 4 bathrooms. I know all the finishes. I got the tile ordered, maybe some at 16 weeks. Well, 8 months ago, I got my design book. So I have that product sitting in stock. So I don't lose any time in my schedule because, hand in hand, my designer's helping me be more efficient. And then I'm helping them deliver on their design. And I'm not going to cut corners. I'm not going to make changes without calling my designer if there's a question. So there's that trust factor, that win-win between the two of us.
And let's be clear, this is the crux of the value of the relationship. It's not just having a designer in the mix. It's having a designer in the mix who has carefully delivered to you a finished design book. So just having a designer, one more person that's going to show up after the tile's halfway done and said, oh, didn't I give you the drawing? That's not how I wanted it. That's no value at all, right?
Right.
So it has to be a well-organized designer who understands what he or she delivers to you in completion at the beginning of the project. And so that's because you don't need a designer that's just as loosey-goosey with the details as the homeowner is. I mean, that's
Correct.
just as silly, right? And like to your point, putting 15 emails out over the 3 days before, during, and after the tile is being laid is not anywhere near the same as you had that design for that bathroom tile before the tiles were even ordered, let alone they're in the middle of being installed.
Yeah, and I think you speak to this when, we only know what we know. And for all of us, there's going to be some designers listening that are very experienced, and this is a no-brainer. And there's some that are working their way up. And so it's really important for them to start thinking about how does design relate to construction? And what I mean by that, okay, can we lay out and tell our builder, I want the shower head exactly at 8 feet because I have these decorative tiles and I don't want it to impact that. Or in the kitchen, I'm doing this backsplash, so I don't want outlets in my backsplash. I want to do, some plug mold underneath the cabinet and I'll hide it in the cabinetry. Or, outlets in the baseboard. I want to do the outlets in the baseboard. Well, as they're very savvy with their design for that final look, they can lay out the builder in their design book and say, hey, make sure that you notice that I have a note to put all outlets in the baseboard. So that way at frame stage, I'm finding out, okay, well, if we have 8-inch baseboard, that I'm centering that and I'm putting my outlets horizontal in that baseboard, and so that's where it really helps. And then when I'm laying out plumbing, I can have the shower head at the right height. So that way in a few months from now, I'm not ripping out drywall or tile because the shower head is exactly where it should have been when I'm trimming it out after the tile's been installed. Right.
It's so important. And you're right. It is a learning curve. It is a learning curve for a designer to get his or her chops up to snuff to really be able to deliver the value to a builder. And so I think it's outstanding. And this last, thing about the ability to photograph, I mean, That's a really great pain point for a designer to mention to a builder. Like, how many times have you wished that work of art that you did was able to go even in a regional magazine? Forget the big national magazines, your own regional magazine where you can get another client from it. You've just spent 2 years building a house, and who knows about it, right? Except for the people who live in it and their friends and neighbors. So I think it's awesome. What do you think? You mentioned there that as you have talk to builders across the country, I'm sure through your podcast and your speaking engagements, that you've learned that some builders just never thought about it, just never really realized how incredible a process-orientated, organized designer can really and not only enhance their own project, but make them more money, make them be more profitable. What do you think the pushback is on the builders who just are like, yeah, not for me? Why? What is that?
That's a great question. And I think it's a lot of things. I think maybe some of them have had bad experiences with designers. Maybe some of them are a little prideful, as some of us builders are, because we think we know the best method. You know, some of it, sadly to say, could be some male chauvinism, right, in the market that, you know, that construction is. And I think there's a lot of things. And maybe some of them just don't have the resources where they build. You know, I'm in Scottsdale. You know, if you're in New York, Scottsdale, LA, San Francisco, it's easy. There's some amazing design firms, so it's prevalent. And so a lot of it, I think more than anything, is education. What it comes down to is that a lot of the builders, when I show them a design book, they're blown away. You know, I could bring them and say, look at this designer. And they see that. The minute they see that, the value's there. And so I think any designer pitching to a builder, that's their key. Say, look at this design book. I'm going to lay out everything. And really, it's a roadmap. It's funny because in so many cases we have our architectural set, but it's the design book that really takes precedence and carries us through the build. And so as these builders see that and the value, then it clicks. And then they can, you know, maybe let their pride go aside or network. And then as you give them the bigger picture, as you've alluded to, marketing, well, our marketing has changed over the years now with LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook and Houzz and Pinterest and TikTok and all these little things. Well, the better our content is, the more followers we're going to have. The more, you know, the better your content, the better traffic you're going to have. And, you know, I'm very active on LinkedIn, and it's funny how a lot of the consumer base, they love to see these beautiful homes, and the constant thread is all these different styles and finishes. And I tell them I work with the best designers. Like, it's amazing. And so it just helps build our brand. And I just think that most builders, once they see the value that designers bring, that now when they're photographing a project, that all 4 bathrooms look the same because they were managing that process. Now they have 4 bathrooms that totally look different but still match the design intent of the house. They see now I have 4 images. That's marketing, right? I have 4 posts for Instagram, 4 posts for Facebook, whereas before I'd have 1 because all the bathrooms look the same.
Right. It's like they all have the same vanity, they all have the same floor, they all have the same countertop, right?
Exactly.
That's so typical, isn't it? It is very typical. Matter of fact, Vin and I were just looking at houses at the Jersey Shore just a couple of months ago. And we walked into one of the houses that the realtor showed us, literally 4 bathrooms, all had the exact same thing. And what was even crazier about it this was what was so crazy about it. It was all 4 bathrooms had the same black cabinets, the same white and gray vanity tops, whether it was marble or quartz, I have no idea, and the same showers that was the combination of gray and white. And every one of them had tile floors that were brand new, but that were brown and beige, like Tuscan modeled. And I was like, what is – it was literally like there was a sellout on the tile, and they didn't care that it didn't match any of the other things that they did. And they were brand new. I mean, this house was built like months ago. And I was just like, who did this? You know? And
it's
so
crazy.
It is.
And if there's a little foresight, I mean, this is another value that the designer can plug in with the client, is that one of the things that happens in bidding, and I can tell you this firsthand, is that to your point of the bathroom designs, if they pick out 4 different tiles, you know, and I know the specs and I know the square footage because I can do a takeoff, I can give my client a hard price. But if I don't have that information from the designer, or it's to be determined, here's what happens. If I have it at the front end, I can send out to 3 tile guys and everyone's bidding apples for apples and I'm getting the best price. If I don't have that information and it's just an allowance to be decided later and the client picks this travertine that's for all 4 bathrooms, well, I can't really send it out to 3 bidders because I have to pick one tile guy that can source it and work with it. And so I don't have as much control on their pricing. I mean, instead of charging me $5 a square foot for install, they could be charging me $7. So there's no price protection. Whereas if the clients, and that's why I teach my clients that, hey, if you hire a designer, you're price protected, which means we're not having to bring in a sub to do the design work, and you're going to be charged for that because you may not think so, but if you're going into the cabinet company, they're going to charge you for design. But if the designer's already doing that, it's been done. They just have to lay it out, execute, and charge you for product and material.
Right. Yes. So crazy. And I literally, like, Vin kind of liked that house, right? And he says to me as we're walking out to go to the next house, he's like, what did you think? And I said, well, I think it'll be a darn shame to rip out brand new bathrooms. That's what I think. I'm like, there's no way. And he's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I'm not even doing it. So anyway, I have to say, I think this is, such valuable information for interior designers. Brad, if I had a nickel for every time in the last 4.5 years on the show, we've talked about how do I work with a builder? How do I convey my value to a builder? What kinds of things do I say to help him or her understand why I should be on the project? And I think you have shared such terrific advice on, your own personal perspective on why working with a designer is so valuable. And therefore, the designers listening can translate that and kind of put the bug in the ear. But there's not hammering it home at the final point is, you've mentioned a couple of times, it's that design book. It's having the thing figured out and delivered to you. There's no value if the designer is designing along the road as you're building just any different than if the client was showing you Pinterest along the road, right?
Yeah, and I think just in closing, we're getting to the end of this, but what I would say is that we've talked about how the value of the designer is not only saving us time in our schedule, which saves us money, they're saving us meeting time, and they're saving us in errors and mistakes, that we'd make in the field. But as you look at growing a business, our businesses are built on reciprocity. So as we have an amazing project with this designer that goes successful, well, this designer can say, hey, I've never had this good of an experience with a builder. I want to bring you on to my next one. And then the builder would be the same as that's come in with this amazing designer. I could bring them in and say, I've worked with her and this firm and they've been amazing. And so the jobs will continue to flow. And that's just another arm of the relationship is the reciprocity and future work based on the synergy from each and every project.
I love it. It's one thing I didn't think to ask you. You know what I hear a lot? Where do I meet builders? And we've had designers on the show. I remember Angela Harris from Trio Environments. She mentioned how she's joined the builder organizations and gone to, go to where the builders are at their meetings and their associations. What's your advice? Is it that? Is there anything beyond that? What would you suggest if you've got somebody fired up now and they are an organized designer and they're like, I'm going to get myself a relationship or two? What would you say, Brad?
Great question. So we know some of the normal things, some of the networking events that maybe some of the appliance showrooms will have, and they'll bring architects, designers, builders, and you can meet them there. Or here in Phoenix, we have ARA, which is an architectural, networking event, and some of the magazines put them on, and those are great. But I would say just something maybe they may not thinking of is let's think about social media. If a builder is active on social media, more often than not, they get it. And what that means is they understand the value of marketing and pictures and design and content and reputation. And so what I've seen is most builders on Instagram are all about working with designers. Okay, so instead of just soliciting, these designers can follow the top 5-6 builders in their area and support them, repost some of their work in their stories saying, go check out this builder, comment, engage. And what ends up happening is after 3-4 months, I've had designers here that 4 or 5 months, they never said, hey, Brad, can you bring me a job? But they've supported me and they've supported my content and commented where I'm like, hey, it's a lot softer landing now that when they say, hey, Brad, can you consider us for a project? Because now I'm seeing what they're doing. I'm seeing their portfolio. Oh, this is amazing. I like their look and their style. So in Instagram, LinkedIn, these are easy methods for designers to start targeting builders and then supporting them. And then in the end, it'll take some time, but those relationships will begin.
I like that, because the truth is, whether you meet somebody at a networking event or you meet them through social media, both relationships take time. Just because you met somebody in real life doesn't mean you go from hello to let's work together in one eyeball meeting. We still have to build that relationship and that trust. And I love the line, if a builder is on social media, then they get it.
Yes.
That's so clear. That's so visual to me, because I'm thinking in my lifetime, the builders that we've worked with that I would not really put into the progressive category, that, like you said, they don't want to learn a new thing. They do it their way. Maybe it is a little male chauvinism. It's all of that stuff. It's like, yeah, they're not on Instagram. They're not the ones on Instagram.
They probably don't even have an email. And I say that kiddingly, but it's true. Like the ones that get it, that are technologically savvy,
right?
And we'll just put social media in that category. That's right. In reality. So
that's right. And the other thing too is, what I also know is we all know any business owner, but we'll use the builder for the example of this. We all know that there is a builder out there that maybe isn't on social, that doesn't get it, but is a forward-thinking firm. And maybe that builder, him or herself, is but doesn't know how to do it, or maybe they've got somebody on staff that is in their ear. So if you know a builder and you're like, oh, well, he or she isn't on Instagram or LinkedIn, so to that point, probably not. But if you just know them to be open-minded, and maybe they're in that category of what you mentioned a few moments ago in the show, is it just didn't occur to me that a designer could really affect my bottom line, because that's probably the first place to hit that more traditional thinking builder. Oh, wait. I can be more profitable, and then hit them with the second, and I can have marketing, and I can have referrals with you, and blah, blah, blah. But you know what I'm saying, right? There's some people that just don't know what they don't know. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that's great advice. And so even if they're not on social media, maybe reputation in town,
right.
A good firm that's has integrity and honest. And then also maybe their website, they could be used in other forms. And just find ways to support them, to bring value to them, right? If you're engaging with them or supporting them or reposting work, however it may be, you can bring that value where now it's a lot softer of a sell.
Mm-hmm. I love it. It's so amazing.
Yeah.
So I'm going to let the cat out of the bag. I mean, you guys, I know you had to just totally love Brad's down-to-earth advice on how to work with the builder and why he values you. And this is my second conversation with Brad, and I decided after the first one that I wanted him as a reoccurring guest. So Brad is going to come on over the coming months, and we are going to just take individual topic here and there, a 30-minute show, and we're going to say, just the highlights of the pain points that he experiences as a builder that you can solve. And we're going to also expose and talk about some of the mistakes that you make in the process of working with a builder in an effort to help you overcome that and create a better process, so that when you work with your builder, he might probably want to send a letter of thanks to Brad. So,
well, I can't wait, LuAnn. I'm looking forward to it. I know we have a lot of topics on the agenda to do that and dive in and to talk about just pros and cons and little things they could do. So I'm excited to join you for that.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. So, guys, thank you so much for listening. And Brad, thank you so much for joining me today. And I encourage everybody to go listen to Brad's podcast, AFT Construction. And you will learn a lot there by listening to him having the conversations with other builders about how to tighten up your process and how to make yourself be a part of that valuable team for them. So, Brad, thanks a lot for joining us today.
You got it. Thanks so much.
Pretty terrific, right? Don't you wish you were a designer in Arizona? How wonderful would it be to have a builder who really understands your value so clearly and so deeply that he just will not do a project without a designer involved, all right? Now, also, let's be clear on why Brad has this philosophy. Brad knows he is on the receiving end of this relationship as much as you are and as much as the architect and the client is. And that's what makes this philosophy of Brad so fantastic. It's a win, 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 right? And as soon as I thank my Doma Studio, I'm going to outline for you the talking points that Brad shared with us so that if you want to approach a builder and express all the reasons why he or she needs you on their next project, you'll have the cheat sheet, all right? Now, one of your selling points is going to be how organized you are. Am I right? Yes. This is a critical component in your value on every project. My Doma Studio is your answer for keeping your projects on time, on budget, and well organized. Client and vendor communication all in one place, all your project details, all your time tracking, and integration to your QuickBooks. Please go start your trial today and see for yourself how much you can save time and money, all right? And saving time and money means making more profit for you. Go to mydomastudio.com/a-well-designed business. All righty. So here are the selling points that I want you to take notice of when you are pitching a builder. All right. Number one, when you, the interior designer, are involved in the project from the beginning, that builder will save time. Brad's exact words, hand in hand, the designer is helping me be more efficient. He also said having a designer involved can save him as much as 2 to 3 months on a project. All right. He explained that this represents thousands of dollars for him depending on the size of the home. This is money in his pocket. This is the point to make to your potential builder. Can save you 2 to 3 months. That's a line that's going to pierce them right where it matters, okay? Number two, having you involved improves the relationship with the builder and his clients. Brad explains he doesn't have to call needing answers in the middle of a client's day. There's no, I need to know this now because the tile contractor's here. Think about it. If you're the client, you don't have a designer involved, you're working with the builder, and he calls you in the middle of the day with this question. You might be busy. You might be in the middle of going into a meeting. You might be running to pick up your kids. But what do you think to yourself? When you're a client, not a designer, you think, I don't know the answer to that. I probably have to go over there and look at the tile so that I can see what he's talking about. I mean, this is going to clog up Brad's day, any builder's day. And so I'm sure there's moments when a builder will be like, lady, you got to tell me now. And other moments where the builder will just suck it up and wait for that client to show up, but all the while frustrated. And this is that little friction that Brad is talking about that is eliminated when there's a designer on the job. Number one, because you probably have given him all the details ahead of time, right, with that perfect builder binder that you supply. But even if you haven't and he has to call you for a detail in the middle of the day, you probably can give him the answer on the spot because you can visualize it. It's what you do every day, right? So big point that Brad is making there. Number 3 point is getting published. This is a huge plus for a builder, and I wonder if you ever thought of this as an advantage to explain. I think you could play this point all day long, right? I know firsthand from WindowWorks that 90% of our worthwhile photography is work we've done for designers. Why? Because no matter how fantastic our awnings look in somebody's backyard or our window treatments are, if the room or the outdoor area isn't styled, it's just not going to be Instagram worthy. So that's the same for builders. So lean on this plus. Lastly, Brad mentioned that the referral relationship is another extremely valuable component of this working relationship. You do a job together, you work well together. You have an opportunity, you bring him in. He has an opportunity, he brings you in. Yes to that all day long, right? Now, I said it during the show. I'm so impressed by Brad, by his message and his outlook on business and his relationships with designers in particular, that I have invited him to make additional appearances on the show. I also asked Brad to make a list of all the things your builder wants you to know and a list of the things that designers do that don't make him so happy, right? His pet peeves. So he's already given me a list of 12 things things he wants you to know, and only 4 pet peeves, so that's pretty good, right? But I'm not surprised. He's a very positive person. Don't you pick that up as well? So here's the thing. We have tons of great shows coming your way on the topic of the design build process, which reminds me, sometime in the next couple of months, we will be coming out with our new course, Design Build for Profit. It will be taught by Jenny Slingerland of Black Ink Interiors. And I know that I was talking about this a few months ago, but we are working on it and it will be coming out pretty soon. I would say a couple of months. But if you want to know when we open the cart and the registration for this course, and get on the email list by going to designbuildforprofit.com. And then we will notify you when it's ready. That's designbuildforprofit.com. All righty. So thank you, as always, for joining me today. I know it's hard now to get podcast time in because there's so much less driving and you probably have so many more people in your face at home. So I really do appreciate that you take the time to tune in. I'm sending you great thoughts, good thoughts, that you are safe both health-wise and business-wise. Decide to be excellent. Thank you so much for joining me again today. This podcast is a production of WindowWorks, your resource for custom window treatments and awnings. To learn how we can help you on your next interior design project, go to www.windowworks-nj.com. And if you're interested in working with me on your business, either through masterminds or one-on-one coaching, or you want to know how to get my book, The Making of a Well-Designed Business, or you just want to know what's going on in the podcast land and where I'm going to be, all of that is found at LuAnnNigara.com. Thank you so much. Have an excellent day.